But I like the fact that these guys were willing to do the heavy lifting. Literally lifting stones, right?
When I was in commercial functions, I found it very difficult for us to execute projects outside our comfort zone.
So I'm back and I'm thrilled to be here in this journey of conversations we have been having with a lot of founders who have been building marketplaces, B2C and B2B. And in that series, today we have Souvik, who's the co-founder of Infra.Market.
Thank you.
And Prakash, a veteran investor and a backer of many seed to scale ideas. So it's fascinating to be sitting here, Prashanth.
Pleasure, Pankaj, to do this with you.
Good.
We go back decades, and
yes,
it's extra.
Thank you.
Nice to do it with you.
Thank you, Prashanth. Thank you. You know, I'll be honest, it's been such a contrasting journey of conversations over the past few weeks with B2B founders. I have entered the conversations thinking these are the three things, but as you peel, things start getting more interesting. But to kick this off, Souvik, why don't we start from the start? Give us a sense of why, and then we can go deeper into 0 to 1.
Why? So I was working in the construction sector. So when I passed out, I did my chartered accountancy from Mumbai in 2009, and I passed out then. And I was working across construction firms from 2009 to 2014, 15. I worked there. One of the key aspects that we always struggled with was that apart from a couple of product categories which you buy for constructions, the industry, at least the supply chains are very, very broken. So if you have to procure material any part of India, you have to source it very locally, because logistics cost is a very high cost, and it's not a uniform way of procurement, uniform way of logistics across India. And construction companies face a unique challenge. So think of as a manufacturing organization. If you're running a manufacturing company in any part of India and you want to scale up, even though if you're buying from micro, small manufacturers, you can still scale it up because you're operating in one particular geography. Construction companies don't have that luxury. Today you could be building a road in Bombay, tomorrow you could be working in Pune. So you're always working 50, 100 kilometers away. And if you're working pan-India, then you will have to deal with pan-India supply chain issues, even as a small, medium-sized firm, because you're not going to get work at a single location. So when we as a construction company, where I was working for a mid-sized construction company, what we realized is that the moment we moved out of our comfort zone, where we had 2 to 3 projects, the dynamics changed. Because so suppose you're working in a city like Delhi, you have green NGT tax, you can't mine in that city, you can't mine in that union territory, you have to get your materials from Haryana or Rajasthan. Same doesn't happen in Mumbai or Maharashtra. In Gujarat, because of its coastline, you can get it easier. So I think the unique sort of peculiarities of supply chain sort of made it very, very difficult for firms, construction firms, to actually scale up and actually go wide geographically in India. I think, and that is very visible when you look at the large construction companies of India. Except a couple, if you look at the largest players, if you look at, when you look at an L&T or who are very pan-India national, all the other firms are regional players. They are regional, they are very large in a particular state, in a particular region, and they find it very difficult to scale up beyond that. So, right? I think that is one of the problems we faced when we were a mid-sized construction company. So when I sort of when I was in commercial functions, I found it very difficult for us to execute projects outside our comfort zones. And that's when I think it sort of triggered in me that this is not the way it happens globally. Okay, if you go to Europe, you have the markets very well organized, where there's actually a uniformity in how you procure materials, which is very unique in India. And one of the unique factors of India is that none of the companies who do building materials do it across the building materials, construction materials sectors. They're all product specific companies. There's no one who's actually giving you that you can buy 5 to 6 product categories from me. All the large players are single product companies and are solving for single product challenges. And not only the supply side challenges, all of the supply side challenges, the supply side is broken. The demand side for a small manufacturer, when they're competing with the large players, is extremely broken, because when you want to reach out to the consumer, you actually need multiple distribution players to actually reach out to the final consumer. Think of yourself, if you're painting your house and you need a bucket of paint, you have multiple brand options. and you go to your shop, but that shop is not getting serviced by the manufacturer. He's getting serviced by a stockist, who's getting serviced by a wholesaler, who's getting serviced by a manufacturer. That's okay for large brands. They can spend on distribution, getting their product in that store. But think of a small manufacturer in Bangalore, okay, or a small manufacturer, any part of Karnataka, who wants to reach you, who wants to supply paint to you for you to paint your house. He's competing with the large brands. How is he going to build this channel out? How is he, how is he going to ensure that his manufacturing capacity is at par with the large players? He keeps churning out product. And typically what happens is that they are constrained to a particular radius where they supply, particular customers that they keep supplying year on year. I think it's a both side problem, supply and demand side problem. And that sort of intrigued me to this. And so when I wanted to start something new, intuitively, because I've worked in the industry and I saw the problems, that sort of came to me, and that's how I got started in this industry.
Wow.
So yeah, no, I'll just say that it's his co-founder, Aditya. He also had some experience. It was very rare that we found two founders going after a space where both of them had in different ways, and of course they knew each other from many years. I think from
we've known each other for 20 years.
20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, they know each other from 20 years, but independently both had experienced the same industry.
Oh.
So Aditya's background is primarily entrepreneurial. He passed out from college. He started doing distribution for Tata Steel, started doing distribution for a lot of steel companies. And his experience was primarily on the supply chain side. My experience was more from procurement, because I was commercial heading products.
Is this something you cooked?
No, I guess it just happened. Yeah.
So when I wanted to sort of quit Aditya was obviously doing his own entrepreneurial ventures. So when I wanted to quit, we know each other for 20 years, we live in the same place, so we've been friends for a long time since college. So I thought, solving for construction material seemed the most it seemed the lowest hanging fruit for us at that time. Okay, this is something we both understand and we both think there's a problem, and that's how I think we attacked.
But there's an interesting twist to the story. Yes. What is the material they picked initially and they came and pitched to us?
What was that?
Aggregates and sand. It was unbelievable. For us, this is as hard as it can get, right? From the cloud to the quarry, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
So dealing with the mines, where these quarries, these stone quarries, and aggregating that, and but it was a very clear use case, because where you get these stones and mines are very local.
Yes.
Right? And it will not work for them from a cost perspective if they had to get stone from Rajasthan and try to construct roads in Bangalore, right? So they have to make it work with whatever local stuff. And similarly for sand, right? And all fragmented, no quality, right? And no predictability in terms of supply, right? They will tell you it will come tomorrow, it will come next week.
And if you're a new company and you say you're working out of Karnataka and you have to get a new project in Rajasthan, there is no national level supplier you can call up and say I need stones and sand in Rajasthan. You have to go there and source locally, and that was what we wanted to bridge. We want to say, okay, can be a national level brand for these fragmented product categories. So that's what we came to. Not everyone. So when we started pitching and we started with quarries, it wasn't a very
but I like the fact that these guys were willing to do the heavy lifting. So they were not afraid, literally, right? Literally lifting stone, right? So you can't get heavier than that. But that also spoke to their, that they wanted to start go as back in the supply chain as possible to literally the source. And, that gave us a lot of confidence that, these guys not only understand the industry, but they're willing to, be, so to speak, in the trenches and in the quarry and make it work.
So let's now go deeper in the 0 to 1 or 0 to 5 or whatever you want to pick the earliest stage, and talk about some of these learnings there, things that worked, things that didn't work, even the so-called proverbial PMF.
And also, why, what was the reason for picking this raw material, right?
Yeah.
So when you could have picked, day one you could have picked, let's say, tiles, or you could have picked, something else.
So I think the first product we started was the one which had the most local supply chain, first of all. So if I pick a tiles, it can go interstate. Maybe not entire country, but it can travel interstate. Steel also can travel, cement can travel 200 kilometers. So there are particular radius. Aggregate and sand becomes economically unviable after 50 kilometers. That was the first touch point, right? So we were solving a problem where we knew that every time a customer wanted a product from 50 kilometers away from his existing project, he would have to go to a new supplier.
You studied all this?
We understood all this because we are part of the industry, right? We understood that it gets unviable after a certain point of time. So, and logistic cost can go as high as 75% of the product cost. So if you are working in Delhi, you're buying aggregate, say at 200 rupees a ton in Rajasthan, you're getting it at 1500 rupees a ton, you're spending 1300 rupees on logistics. So logistic cost is a very large component if you keep going away, further and further away from where you want to work. Second was, we saw that in which product category, there were no brands. There was no one you could call up. You had someone in tiles, you had someone in paint. So, but if you look at volume by volume and rupee by rupee, what you need to, if you want to construct a road, 40% of what you want to construct a volume by volume is aggregate and sand. You need to do fillings. You need to mix it in concrete, cement for concrete. You need to mix it in bitumen if you want to do asphalting layer. And there was no brand you could call. And there were brands globally. So if you went to global to Europe and you went to the Middle East, there were large brands who had solved this problem. In India, it not got solved. So I think that the multiple use cases where we wanted to sort of focus on aggregate and sand.
So Souvik, but really you found your fit in concrete, right?
Yes, we found our fit in concrete.
So how did you go from the sand and this thing to really...
So we started with aggregate and sand, where we went to crushers and we started leasing out capacity. We said, we will buy 20% of your capacity. What we realized was none of the crushers which are manufacturing this aggregate and sand are actually utilized 100% of the time. They utilize 60-70% of the time. And what we also realized, there's a way to solve this problem. What traditional players had done, putting up manufacturing units was actually not the right way. Because if I put up manufacturing units, I am going to have the same problems existing players have.
Yeah.
Because if a project tomorrow moves away from me, then whom do I supply to? Right? Because the project will move away. Some new project will come out 20 kilometers away. So what we instead said is, there are so many plants across India, let's buy out 10 to 20% capacity across all of them. So now we have a manufacturing capacity that parallels any of the largest players, but it's not concentrated in a single area. So I buy 10% in 20% of 10 crushers in Bangalore. I have in Bangalore, I'll have in Hubli. I'll spread it out. So I'll be closer to the customer. And my fixed costs are not located in one area where I need to spend a lot on logistics.
And none of them felt threatened by you because they were smaller?
No, they were smaller. More importantly for them, think of it that they are already doing 70-80% in that market. What they were not being able to do and utilize that capacity, we wanted to bridge that. We said, we will buy out 20%.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Right? So we said, we'll buy out 20%, you continue with the 80%. What we realized is that obviously that aggregates were being used primarily for roads, bridges, but they're also being used in concrete plants. Concrete, where they were being used to manufacture as a raw material for concrete, and concrete was then getting sold. And what we realized in concrete is, although there are a couple of large brands, first of all, it's a sunrise sector. India has a unique problem in concrete. India sells 90% of its cement as dry cement and only 10% as wet concrete. Globally, it's the other way around. Globally, 90% gets sold as wet concrete, only 10% gets sold as dry cement. So we knew that this market had to go up. India will reach global standards, right? What we also realized is that what is true for aggregates, that you can't transport beyond 50 kilometers. Concrete is only 15 kilometers because it's a perishable commodity.
Oh, yes.
So it's a 3-hour maximum. And there were no large brands. There were a couple of large brands who were mainly cement players. So we decided that since we have aggregates sorted, which are our key raw materials for concrete, we could supply to concrete manufacturing plants, buy out their capacity from them, and start supplying concrete. So first of all, we were getting concrete manufactured, and the key raw material which was required in that was also being manufactured by us. So we were actually grabbing margins across value chains, right? So we started doing concrete. Today we are India's second largest concrete manufacturer.
Wow.
We are larger than many cement players who manufacture concrete today in India. And we have no fixed capacity of our own. We are again buying out capacity from multiple players. We work with today 400 manufacturers in concrete alone.
Oh, so that has scaled.
That has scaled, where today we are the second largest manufacturer nationally. Okay, under our brand, today we supply more than major cement players in India.
Prashanth, what happened? Like he's just done a shortcut.
So no, of course, the fact that they moved from just aggregates to concrete happened after we started.
After that.
Right? So that after we
in fact,
had
we
done our
set up
seed,
Karnataka after Accel put in their first check.
Yeah.
We were only a Mumbai-based company then. When we started in 2016, 2016 when we and Aditya started, we were actually, first of all, there was no concept of B2B commerce marketplaces. And we didn't understand a lot of it. So 16 to 18, 19, we were bootstrapped. Okay. And we typically operated in one particular city. We were solving supply chain issues there. We're doing aggregates. We're gone beyond Mumbai, but only in aggregates. And then we realized that we have to eventually grab the value chain. We were building the use case for concrete.
Sure.
And then we met Prashanth. We met, I think at that time, Kanishk at Accel.
Yeah, Kanishk was an analyst and working with me. First spoke to them.
Oh, wow.
A lot of credit to Kanishk to spot this.
So what happened there? Like, how did this?
Yeah.
The gears got shifted.
So I think what they always had in mind is that this has to be a highly profitable business. So that day one was another, very different mindset.
And it's not like today where you had where everyone's focusing on profitability. I don't think that focus
that
focus.
But this was which year was this?
2019.
19.
Wow.
2019, right? 2019 was as heady in terms of GMV and getting bigger and bigger in terms of top line, right? But these guys were refreshingly different. So they said no. Day one, they were already profitable.
When they met you.
When they met me, right? Yeah. And they wanted to remain that way. But they wanted to construct, it's one thing to say that, I'll go deep into the supply chain, but the understanding that, margins are going to happen by kind of methodically stitching together all these aspects, and the sum of that is what is going to make them profitable was something I guess they evolved, right? So
I'll give you an example. Like, I think our ability to stitch supply chains. So we manufacture aggregates. We manufacture construction chemicals at plants, okay? We have construction chemical plants who manufacture chemicals for us, which we supply to all the large infra projects in India.
So each of these are independent companies in today's world.
Yeah, they're all mini, they sound like mini companies.
Yeah. So basically...
they are big
basically
companies. And in fact, one of those big concrete companies they ended up buying. Yeah. That's a different story. But, so each of these are different brands.
So for example, we supply waterproofing chemicals to, if you're building a bridge where you need anti-corrosive chemicals for your steel, we do that. Then those chemical companies also supply raw material where we get our paint manufactured, which we supply to stores. So the backward integration we've been able to do. So for example, think if I am building a concrete block. For that, if I need chemicals, aggregate, concrete, all three back end, I'm also supplying independently to my customers. So I actually have backward integrated to majority of the raw materials. We run our own paint brand. We bought out a strategic stake in a company called Shalimar Paints, which is listed.
Yes. Yeah. One of the old world.
Yes. So now their raw materials, we get it manufactured at our own chemical plants, which are actually very earlier used to only supply to external parties. We actually have backward integrated supply there. All the concrete manufacturers we work with, their chemicals are manufactured in their plants. So our ability to stitch that entire end to end actually is the only way we can actually generate margins in this business, because that is where the margin profile will start coming up.
So is that the core thing that you follow? Because one of the things that occurred, Prashanth, is you are doing so many things. How do you decide what to do and what to leave out?
So there is a relationship and kind of a method to this.
Method to the madness.
Method to this, otherwise it looks like...
Because now it sounds madness.
Yeah, right. So like you said, if there is a block of concrete and that had all these elements, right? They have then, methodically put together those elements.
And build supply chain for each of those elements, where each of the elements we are commercially viable for us to supply to external parties, and then we use it internally to build another product which then we supply. So we actually, our profit pool then starts increasing as we go further and further down the value chain and backward integrate. For example, we've built a channel today which can sell multiple products. Okay, I sell to retail hardware stores, I sell to B2B players. When I sell them multiple products from tiles to paints, my ability to push products in those channels, my ability to spend in the channel is much more than a single product company.
So this is now kind of little bit we are going to the distribution side. But just to kind of end the supply chain part of the story, I think the takeaways, at least for me from this, was that you can actually build almost like a virtual brand of house of brands, right? Without actually, they of course bought some of those, but you virtually build these brands, and these brands have synergies. See, that's the important part. These are not just discrete brands, right? And they are vertically backward integrated to the source. And there are relationships between those brands that you also leverage in terms of raw material. Wow. So it's a combination of these that give you the margins, right?
So like you said, so you basically go into every product category and backward integrate as far as possible, and you find common raw materials which you sort of leverage on, which will give a profit. For simple thing, I sell paint, I sell construction chemicals, and I sell I sell steel. The anti-corrosive coating that goes in steel also gets manufactured at my chemical plant. The raw material for paint also gets manufactured. So you backward integrate to the level where you start increasing the capacity utilization of your plants, and that is where the synergy benefits come in on the supply side.
And there's so much of control.
Yeah.
Yeah, control, and also while you're doing all this, you're doing it in a very distributed manner.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a challenge in terms of how they manage it, and I don't know if there is technology and other things that you have to build.
People.
Technology and people that you have to build.
So for example, we are the only company in concrete today where 100% of all the supplies are digitized. Every concrete plant we work with today, where we have only 10%, 15% capacity, we are able to track what raw materials they use, what is the mix design they've followed. For example, if we've given an order where they are supposed to put in 400 kg of cement in a concrete plant, and if they put in 390, we have the option to accept or reject it. And we get that visibility on a real-time basis. That sort of depth in technology that has been built allows us to virtually own the plants. Even if we don't physically own the plants, we virtually have control on everything that happens at the plant level. I think impact of technology in this sector on the supply side is enormous. Because think of, you are working with, instead of owning a plant and putting up X amount of dollars and setting up a unit, you have saved all that money. And you have gone and said, I will now set up 20 units which will manufacture for me. And not only am I saving money, I am distributing it so well that if tomorrow there's an order in Bangalore, I have 12 plants in Bangalore to service it. But if there's an order in Bangalore, I have plants in Bangalore also. I don't need to shift it from Bangalore. So the logistic cost becomes so much cheaper. It makes it so much more viable for you to actually supply those products.
So Souvik, shifting now on the distribution front, which we just alluded to. Was it because you were creating brands and you thought these brands ultimately have to become, to become brands, you need to reach consumers and create multiple other channels? What was the thinking behind then setting up the B2B2C strategy?
Yes.
So when we started with B2B. So when Accel came on, that retail was, B2B2C was not what we were looking at. But what we realized is that if we want to eventually start becoming non-dependent on our manufacturing, where we eventually said the manufacturers are contract manufacturers, but we are building the brand on top. If you want to create a moat, how do you stop tomorrow someone from coming in and doing exactly that?
Yes.
Right? You need to create something where your customer refers to you and not the manufacturer who's manufacturing the product. Right? Okay. Yeah. So you need to own the customer and not the manufacturer. Part of it is service, but part of it also has to be your brand. Right? And how do you create a brand without going B2B2C? Because if you look at these B2B brands, industrial brands, they are large brands in B2B, but the entire brand recalls happens from B2B2C.
Exactly.
Right? So if you think of a large cement player, they do a lot of B2C advertisement, not because they sell to B2C. You are not the consumer, right?
You say it.
Yes.
Actually.
Yeah. You're not the consumer, but they want to influence a B2B guy into thinking their brand is large, and hence they do B2C advertisements. Right?
Okay.
So I think that is where we wanted to focus. We wanted to build B2C. And what we realized is there are a lot of small manufacturers in India who are not able to go B2B2C. They can only do B2B. Because spending in B2B2C channel is actually very, very expensive. And if you think of a small paint manufacturer in Bangalore or a small tile manufacturer, how will he sell in that channel? How will he? Because for him, he's going to compete with the large players who are spending a lot of dollars on that channel.
Yes.
Right? And so he will sell in that small radius that he is used to. We decided we can spend on the channel because we have a fixed B2B2 demand. We have a supply side fixed. Now we need to start building a brand, build that channel which will help us reach the final consumer. And we have built that channel where we can enable a small manufacturer to come and say, I am going to manufacture. You manufacture under my brand, I'll ensure you have 100% utilization of the capacity.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's how we started out.
Yeah, the scale and quality thinking that they got from B2B, right?
Okay.
Gave them a lot of leverage day one on the B2B2C.
Such an important point
Right?
here.
It's really important. You can't go to B2C and start out. First of all, aggregating everything from different places is not going to be possible because you won't have demand for it, right? So you will not see. It's easier to plug in a B2B2C strategy to a B2B, a scaled B2B business is what our learning is.
Yeah, so I think even for us, when we initially were thinking of starting B2C, it was very complex. And we focused on B2B because that would give you economies of scale. That will give you enough that you can go to a manufacturer and say, I'll buy you 20% of your capacity. You can't do that if you're selling B2C.
So you get price leverage.
Yes.
And then you can use that to build the channel on B2C. So I think one of the unique things that we realized is that B2B companies going B, for us, it was sort of, at one point of time, we realized that now that we have built a B2B, it's much easier going B2C than had we started directly going that way. Directly going B2C would have been a cash guzzling exercise for us, at least.
Someday we should get a B2C founder. It would be such contrasting conversation, and I want to hold back my opinion here.
Right. No, but I think it's not easy though, right? So now this company, because of the early DNA and what they've done well, they've done very well on the B2B part. Now in this B2C journey, it's a new learning. So it is going to be. They'll encounter, dealing with retail, managing
dealing with
retail,
consumers.
Dealing with consumers, servicing consumers is very different from servicing businesses. So in a sense, it's a complex thing they've taken up, and it'll be really two companies, right? And they'll have to figure how to build synergies, but at the same time have best-in-class capabilities for both.
So that makes me ask another question. We are discussing everything through the lens of B2B, B2C, in fact, through the franchisee model. What does it mean for org structures? And what does it mean for building teams? Now the mindsets are going to be completely different.
So I think in B2B at least, one of the key learnings for us was we've always been more biased towards getting people from the industry. Because for us, supply chain was more critical.
Yes.
Right? And supply chain, we felt, also these are not difficult, these are not easy industries to work in. So if you get someone who's not from this industry and you want to build supply chains where you have to go and source from mines and quarries across India, sometimes it's difficult. There are people who will make that jump from one industry to another, but it's not an interesting industry for me to go and grab someone who's a first principle thinker and come and say, come and build me supply chain of mining. Doesn't attract. It's not attractive to a young guy, right? But now that and I think though initial years when we built B2B the entire model, we focused more on experienced people who had done it, who had been there, done that, built brands, for us to focus on supply chain. Our model was different. We were not going to put up manufacturing, but the ethos was the same, right? You had to ensure quality, you had to ensure supply chain, you had to ensure logistics efficiency. So we bought people in who had actually built these for single product companies, have that experience, and we had to ensure that they now built it horizontally so that it could fit into multiple products. As we build B2B2C, what we realize is that first of all, our B2B2C is a little different because we're not eventually going to the consumer, we are going to an architect or we are going to an interior designer. Yeah, so it's a little different, right? So it doesn't have a lot of the intricacies maybe of a pure B2C.
Also the brand part, right?
Yeah.
B2B brands are very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
A Kajaria is a very different kind of...
Very different, right?
The way you build it. So I think they also found a challenge in finding the right kind of brand and marketing person that would fit their stuff. And now they have the problem because it's two kinds of brands.
Yeah. So in B2C, I think what we realize is that none of the industry people, when you're building a distribution channel, none of the industry experienced people would like to build it for single product. And that is completely... So they found it difficult to build horizontal distribution channel. Because they have not come from those players. So I think over there, what we've realized is hiring people who are not from the industry, hiring people from FMCG background, hiring someone from who's actually very comfortable building for multi-product supply distribution channels. Actually brought us a lot of insight there, and that's the way we've gone on the retail side. Because over there, I need someone who is product agnostic, because supply chain is the same for B2B and retail.
Oh, yeah.
The supply chain guys need to be very product specific technical guys. But on the distribution channel, on the retail front, we are focusing more on people who are product agnostic and who actually don't come from any product baggage.
In terms of role, what is the most important role you hired for, or any miss hiring in that sense and in that work?
I think the critical roles that we hired for and where maybe we also struggled is eventually the supply chain side, right? So because you have to get people who actually understand build supply chain, because that is the key, most critical part of your piece. Because you're essentially you cannot go B2B2C, and eventually struggle with supply chain. B2B, it's still a problem you can solve. It's a question of cost, right? You can get your product from another city, supply to him. B2B2C, once you lose the reputation with the final consumer, you're done, right? So I think the critical piece that we had to solve for was supply chain. Today, the critical piece that we struggled with for some time was marketing. Because we had to get someone who had to understand that this had to be a horizontal play. But now I think we've got someone who's sort of, working on it and who's sort of been, who's been able to sort of grab that. But the critical piece that we did struggle was marketing, because essentially because these brands have not got built. So you don't have a brand today which does tiles, paints and also concrete. How do you differentiate? How do you ensure that the pure, how do you ensure someone as a consumer who's walking into a shop is okay buying tiles and paint of the same brand? How do you position your brand? I think those are things that we really struggled with initially. Luckily for us, B2B2C was a very small component, so we could keep iterating on that. And our main bread and butter obviously came from B2B. It funded that part of the business. But today, I think we've sort of almost close to the solution there, where we'll sort of launch our brands across the B2B2C space. And I think that is something that we struggled with for almost a year. Like last 1 year, we've been discussing it, where that part of the puzzle hadn't been solved.
So Souvik, the other area that Souvik himself is always steeped in finances and things. He's not credit. He's not talking about that. But I think this business does require really a lot of diligent credit and risk and cash management.
So at what point in time you hire a risk team, for example?
So we hired very early. We hired a chief risk officer very early in our journey. We hired risk team very, very quickly, because at the end of the day, you're doing B2B. And your risk team was more critical for B2B than for retail.
How early, Souvik? Because this is something that people will learn from.
I think I would say a year after we got, for like 19, in 2020, we had a risk guy in place.
Yeah, I think it's probably as important as getting your first, in a B2C company, your first UX or product person, right? Okay. That early. Because this is part of really the foundation that you have to put in place.
Because also what you have to realize is that most companies which are in this sector are single product companies, and hence have a limited exposure to a client because they're supplying a single product. You want to supply multiple products. You want to supply across the geography space. So you're going to have a larger exposure sometimes to particular clients. You have to do your risk very diligently over there. What we also realize is that this business cannot be equity funded, because then it has the return on capital metrics don't work.
Okay. So you have to diligently and judiciously work with credit.
Debt partners, where you have to eventually ensure that the credit you're giving to a customer, or if you're paying early to your supplier, you get banks to support you. Every time if you go to business and say, I need equity for growth, it's not going to be a viable way of growing this business. I can't grow from 100 million in revenue to 5 billion in revenues and get equity to fund that growth. Right? You have to first of all generate profits. Second, you need financing partners to come and finance those transactions. Otherwise, it's non-viable completely, because, and that's how, if you look at traditional businesses, that's how they've grown very well, because they've got banking finance partners to come and support. And that's why profitability was very, very key from us for day zero. Because the 2016 to 2019, when we grew our business without equity, we were growing it by partnering with banks. And we could not at that time even afford to become loss making at that time. We had to ensure we were unit economics positive. And that sort of has been a constraint, but also a very good constraint for us as we grow, because we have to always ensure that we are making enough money to justify lenders to come in and support our business. And today, like, we work with almost 20 lenders in India today who support our business, who finance our transactions. And I think in terms of B2B marketplaces, or in the size of scale that we have, we've actually only raised capital for acquisitions. We've never raised capital for organic growth.
Yeah, another very important point.
Yes, so we've only raised equity capital and used it to acquire companies. If you look at how much we've raised and what we've acquired, majority of our money has gone into acquisition of companies. The organic growth that we've achieved has actually been funded through debt partners I think that is very critical if you're beating B2B. Otherwise, you're going to hit a roadblock at growth.
Souvik, maybe one other aspect which we have not covered is exports.
Yeah.
Right. How important is exports from a margin perspective, diversification, various things, right? So, and is it bring new challenges, and what has been your experience with exports?
So when we started in 2019, when we for the first check, right, I think we had 3-4 key understandings, right? One was that we had one risk, which is the industry risk, which is cyclicity of the industry. We had credit risk because we had working capital in the business, and we had to get, and third is we had geography risk because we were only an India-based company, right? I think we solved for the first industry risk by going retail, by going home improvement market beyond the construction market, because cyclicity will not hit the home improvement market the way it hits the construction market.
Yes.
Right? So that was the first.
So the B2C was important.
Was important for us, not only brand building, but actually solving for cyclicity risk in
I didn't realize this. I was only thinking through brand lens.
So the idea was to solve cyclicity. Second was the entire working capital is negative for the B2B2C industry. So if you're working in B2B industry, you have to give credit to your customers. But if you're working B2C, it's almost cash and carry. You collect upfront. So both negate each other, and our working capital cycles come down. So that was the second chance. Third is the geographic risk, because you're at the end of the day working in India. I think what happened post-COVID is almost forced into exports, right? We decided that because at that time India shut down.
Yes.
And exports, luckily for us, exports were still open in many countries, right? So we could export products. And we started looking at exports very aggressively in 2020. Today, our around 20% of our GMV today would be from exports. So we are very large. We help Indian manufacturers export almost more than 20-30 million a month today we do of exports. For us, it's a de-risking strategy more than just a profit-making strategy. How do you ensure that you have enough business coming in from? So when all the businesses in India in 2022 specifically, this last calendar year, faced input cost pressures, because they were importing products into India as their raw material. So if you're a paint company, you're importing, your crude prices went up, so impacted you. We were one of the few companies which could offset it because we had exports. So we actually were getting products manufactured in India and exporting, and there we got we could offset our input price risk there. Second, today, when all majority of companies which are only domestic are struggling with currency risks because dollar has gone up and their input cost has gone up without that, we again are at a situation where 20 to 30% of our business is pure dollar collections, and that offsets the currency risk of imports for us. So I think for us, it's a hedging strategy where exports, while it's important from revenue point of view, it's more important from risk mitigation and overall as a business model, the sustainability point of view, where we have a business model which can take shocks. So if crude goes up to 100 or dollar moves up substantially, we are not only bleeding. We have that offset. We can keep offsetting.
So much of financial and currency.
Yeah, there is a lot of details in how you manage the finances.
So how did you, I mean, who does these things?
I obviously come from a finance background, but we also have a great team. I think it's very critical. If you are a B2B company, finance is a very critical component, because think of a B2C company. B2C companies typically don't have a credit play. They have a cash burn, and that cash burn is only operational cash burn.
Yes.
As a B2B company, you may have an operational cash burn, and then you will have a credit play, right? So you will have capital going out and credit to the customers, and you may be burning money.
Yeah.
So it's a double whammy, right?
Sides,
so you have to have, and you can't fund everything by equity. So you have to take one part of that out and ensure that it's a business model which banks can fund. So that is the only way you can actually grow this out, and that is the only way you remain capital. Otherwise, by the time you've built it, as a founder, you will be left with hardly anything in your company because you are diluted so much, right?
So the other vector or lever in the long run, Souvik, is innovation in materials.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And both on the standpoint of green materials.
Yeah.
And also materials that have better efficacy or better utility.
Yeah.
Right. What's your strategy in keeping ahead of the curve? And maybe like the first phase was about aggregating capacity and doing. is the next phase of your journey actually helping a lot of these companies get more efficient by helping them use better materials and leapfrog in some of the technologies?
So I think we've already seen from 2016 when we started, we've already seen the journey from natural sand to manufactured sand.
Yeah.
So we are today one of India's largest manufactured sand supplier today. We are also for example, we have also seen the journey where companies are slowly have moved away from bricks to blocks to panels, where today we manufacture panels which are not only climate efficient, they are also commercially inefficient now, and companies are moving away. We are working with companies where we want to reduce the usage of traditional materials. For example, we are working with a geofabrics company today in India where we distribute their products, where we say these products geosynthetics can replace cement steel usage to a certain extent.
Geosynthetics, yeah.
Geosynthetics.
It's a huge space and pretty evolved in the US.
Yeah.
But very early.
Very early in India. So we're working with this company there where we want them to distribute the products to the customers, and we want to help them garner larger market share and help use, and it has just got approved for many. Earlier it was only used in infrastructure, it's just got approved for railways, it's getting approved. So I think what we must appreciate also is the government's initiative to push for these products, right? You see that also, that where they want to push for these products, they want to move away from, they want to keep an alternative from the, I think those are product categories we want to shift towards. We want to shift towards newer product categories. We want to shift towards geosynthetics. We want to have more panels than bricks. And that will come eventually. In everything that we do, we have to be part of that innovation, because if we want to remain relevant in the ecosystem. Because if you're looking at only traditional building materials, then we'll obviously also have a lot of incumbents that you have to work with. So it's always for us to find that white space where a lot of incumbents maybe are not present, and if we can sort of graduate toward those product categories, that will only give us more sort of more right to win in those markets basically.
It's in your interest, and I think for larger the climate and everything that we are talking about, your ability to shape. It's amazing.
Help India in the net zero by 2070.
Yeah, I mean, I was just,
because we are going to build so much infra in this country. Souvik, there's going to be nothing more important than finding greener ways of building in this country.
And for me, that's okay. So final round of insights, right? This has been very joyful, Prashanth, through your lens, and Souvik, the doer. If you were to handpick 2-3 things of building Infra.Market, or what you saw, Prashanth, so far, as key lessons for anyone who is a first-time founder or mid-stage who can learn from Infra journey, can you, both of you, handpick 2-3 things that stand out?
Yeah, I'll start with the idea that I think if you're building a B2B marketplace in India, you have to stitch the entire value chain. I think you cannot build for either supply side or demand side. We started with supply side, where we become quasi-manufacturers. We then became, so there are a lot of B2B marketplaces in India who are young, who focus on a particular part of the, there are platforms which only do logistics distribution. There are platforms who are only building the brand. And there are platforms who are only solving for manufacturing. As a B2B marketplace, if you really want to make money because what you have to realize as a B2B marketplace or B2B platform, you are targeting a very large market, but also you're targeting a market which has incumbents.
Yes.
And where there are large profit pools and you're going to face competition. If you don't stitch that entire value chain, if you don't go in supply, go at the very back end and become a quasi-manufacturer, if you don't build in-house capability of logistics and distribution, and eventually don't build that brand, if you don't do that entire value chain, you will never make enough money in this ecosystem.
So true.
And I think that is one of the key insights that I have had, that eventually you have to do all three. Now it's up to you which you want to do first. You start with brand first and say, I want to do B2C first, and I will backward integrate into logistics and then backward integrate into manufacturing. We went first with manufacturing, logistics, and now we are trying to build B2C.
What decides that sequence for you?
I think what decided the sequence for us was our experience and the industry. Where we felt the supply chain. But if you say building an industry where brand is the most important, then you can start first with brand. But if you're a B2B marketplace, if you don't solve for all three eventually, then you are not going to be relevant in the long run, or you're not going to have enough profit pool in the long run to protect you or build that moat.
So that was one big learning actually, and which I would say all entrepreneurs, this meaning of, people keep using and throw around this word full stack, right? But it's really it's multiple full stacks. It's not one full stack.
So well
That's what
said.
I learned, right? And you kind of figure out how some of these also, the interplay between them and the sequencing that we spoke about, these full stacks, right? And like we said, which part of the full stack do you start with? The front or the back, and which one is front and back, right? The second big learning, and I would say that very, very important to manage both credit risk and debt acquisition capabilities in parallel, right? And day one in these companies, just like you in B2C companies need to crack CAC or customer acquisition costs, here you need to really crack, how do you get high quality customers that are then bankable and will help you raise the right amount of debt without being dependent on equity raising, right? And finally, immersing yourself from a domain perspective, either if you already have it, or through a co-founder, or in the pace that you build it, so that you kind of are embedded in the industry is more important, because the industry specific, sector specific nuances in B2B are a lot more than in B2C, where it's about consumer brand, and those are little bit generic and translatable from one kind of product to another kind of product. But here, product to product, sector to sector, I think the immersion and the nuances need to be respected a lot more.
Wow, amazing. Souvik, Prashanth, I think my key takeaway here is I smell a lot of enterprise building blocks, what they call built to last kind of a theme, because it's astounding, Prashanth, how what it takes to build a great company. Some of the building blocks are so relevant even today. Everything that you said, Souvik, and you about profitability or understanding of the business, I think it's amazing how these are timeless building blocks. And,
yes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prakash.
Thank you.
Thank you, Souvik.
Thanks for having
It was quite
me.
enjoyable.
Thank you.
Thank you.